in advance of seeing the whole body of the book, I was quite captivated by the level of performativity around kind of being the subject, and I think that's been very much amplified in these works. And I think that one of the first questions I'd like to ask each of you is this relationship to the issue of portraiture and the performance of the portrait. In terms of the work you're doing, as you say, there's a high degree of a relationship to performativity within the work, and coming out of the history of working with performance art and thinking about that, there is in some kind of sense a script or an idea. But with this body of work, there isn't a script in the performer's head necessarily. But you, in a sense, are allowing them to enact this invisible script. And I'd just like you to say a little bit about that process and about the ethics of it.
Well, I don't think that they actually enact anything. I think that I make the structure of the picture, which is a conceptual structure, hopefully related to who they are and their circumstances, and then they bring themselves to that. It's not that they actually perform, it's just that they bring themselves to this idea that I give them. So, and in terms of the ethics, that's a question that I've been asked before about, particularly about the heads, because those pictures have been shown before. And, because people have asked me that because I didn't spend a lot of time with people. I photographed people one after the other. I talked to them for a little bit while I did the standing portraits, but then not when they put their heads down. Now, is that not ethical to, who am I to photograph them in a way that when I don't know anything about them? And I think, I think that's okay, because what I'm doing is I'm looking at their face, and they're bringing their face, and that, a portrait is primarily about a face. It's also about gesture and clothing and all kinds of other things, but that's all been stripped away. So all we see in these pictures is a head and neck, and that's their head and their expression, their face, that they bring to this structure. So I think that's valid.
Yeah, it seems to me, I would say that if your work seems ethically engaged, it would seem to me that in relationship to the question of the portrait, what we're trying to do is ensure that within that portrait, the question of the war and the kind of politics, positioning those subjects, is revealed in a way which, as you say, is not the same revelation as the media of those people.
But I must say that these pictures are taken for the public and not for the subject. And I think that photography is so fascinating that these soldiers could look at these pictures at the moment and think, and not understand them, and then in the future would see them differently. I'm endlessly fascinated by what how photography seems to us over time, how it looks like one thing to one person and something else to somebody else, which one can see on the blog of the billboards, because some people hate them and some people appreciate them. So photography is just so broad in terms of how we see it and in terms of time. And I find that fascinating.
Certainly the relationship to time is totally fundamental to your work, really. And again, looking at your work in advance of meeting, this kind of sense of sleeplessness and kind of sleepwalking, and the kind of the trauma of not being able to find a place of sleep and having to inhabit a different city. And what was revealed to me is the Delhi I know has disappeared. The Delhi I know through mediation is chaotic and busy, and you found this other city. But I suppose following on from that previous question, who then is the audience you're representing these sleepers to?
I don't see my work as portraiture at all. And I've done the work for myself. The audience is always second. The work is done primarily because I'm there and I want to make these pictures. And in response to your first question, I think my only performance is light, because I encounter these people when they're sleeping, and I'm careful usually not to wake them up. And about the ethics of it, I don't feel, in most cases, I try and mask the identity of it. A lot of my pictures are the sleepers not visible or not recognizable, and even when they are recognizable, I'm not going to tell you where I made those pictures. You'll never find those people. And in terms of time, this other city is exactly what I'm looking for, this other world where the chaos falls away and there's silence.
And thinking about Oumar's kind of body of work, and the question there with Oumar's work, the representation, I thought that some very interesting issues there in terms of the kind of politics of this doomsday portraiture of the new city of the new state of Senegal. I mean, did I understand that right? That was like his first job was to absolutely represent the new republic by photographing each individual. Was this the project?
Saying that what she found so interesting was with his work was that at this point in time he's collecting photos and collecting people's identity, and for Frederique is that not precisely what photography at the end of the day is mainly?
The collection of identity.
Yeah.
The concept même of portrait and identity is to collect it. To make a comparison, whereas Sandra, I believe, yes, Suzanne, you said that you do your work for the public, not for the subject, and you said that you do the work for yourself. Well, in Oumar Ly's case, he does the portrait for the portrait. So it's sort of like the third one along to most of your work.
I think that I'd like to expand on that concept of portrait for portrait. In what sense?
C'est un travail d'artisanat.
It's for the thing itself, because the important point that Frederique has made on the way about Oumar Ly is that, as I said before, he is a craftsman. So that's what is most important to him. It's not an art, there's not really, he just takes those photos for the photo and for the portrait.
C'est des valeurs différentes du document.
It's got a different value to the document itself.
Yeah, in that sense, I suppose that's maybe, I mean, that's one of the issues again about time in all of these works, that actually the interpretation of the meaning and relevance of his work is something which is exposed over time. So thinking about the politics of Senegal, thinking about the politics of the representation of Africa, over time, as we said, and 2007 events by Emily Lignac, the body of work shown there winning a prize. There's a politics of the image which is not stable, it's volatile, it's subject to negotiation. And so in time, the work of the photographer changes dramatically.
That's something which is common to all photography, right?
Yeah.
Because all photography is a recording of a trace, whether staged or real, documentary or conceptual. And with time, what was in front of the lens disappears, but that image, if it's preserved, is always there. So as the years pass, it gathers momentum. Right?
Yeah. And in that sense, I mean, one of the questions I'd like to, another question there, is the kind of the sense of the document. So what is the document in terms of the body of work? How do you compile your sense of the body of work in these specific documents? Is that something that you can... So, as we've just said, that there's this notion around the development of the meaning of the body of work over time, and you create a specific set of documents, like one set of works, like the sleeper. How do you decide, specifically, how do you decide the kind of closure of that work? And is that easy?
No, not for me. I work, I took 3 years in my first project, and there was no defining mark that I finished it. I just knew I'd finished it. And with Sleepers, I'm going to be away from home for a year. And again, I spent almost 3 years in Sleepers, and I don't feel I finished it yet. Because, I mean, one reason which again, this is justification. It's because I feel I haven't finished it is why I'm looking for a reason why I haven't finished it. And I feel that because the space is so important, I haven't interrogated the space around the Sleeper so much. So I'd like to do more different spaces, deserts, mountains, what have you. So.
Yeah. And Suzanne?
Well, I think I'm mostly finished with this work, although I would like to photograph more women. But this phase is done, and certainly a military base is not going to invite me back.
You'd be Googled.
Yes.
Yeah.
Scene.
Can I Throw it out to the audience. There's a
Yeah,
question
I
now.
want to exactly that. I want to ask a question about like how did the army react to you? Did they communicate about that? Like, when you asked them if you could photograph, they asked, is it for political reasons? But it, like in the end, it got like a political effect, didn't it?
Well, it did, and for a long time I said it wasn't political, and that's really not true.
No.
It's obviously political, but
Yeah.
it wasn't partisan. I really wanted to look at individual soldiers and consider the humanity of these individuals. I wanted to. So in that respect, and I tried very, very hard to not have it become an anti-war statement, because that's really not what I intended. And did they respond? They didn't respond. When I had the first show, there was an art critic came to speak, and I thought, oh, this is going to be great. It's art meets the military, because we invited all of the people. And I photographed more than 90 soldiers at Fort Drum. We invited them all, and they said, oh, we've never come to an art opening. Yes, we'll come, we'll come. Many of them were shipped to Afghanistan just before, and the rest of them didn't come. So I found that kind of curious. I think it's just a different world. It's very hard to bridge that. But when the billboards were canceled in Minneapolis, St. Paul, we asked some of the soldiers what they thought about that, and they came out in support of the project. One of them said, actually, the first time we put up billboards, I thought, well, what is this guy going to think? He's going to drive down. I didn't know where he was. I thought if he drives down the highway and sees a 48-foot billboard of himself, he may run into a tree or something. So I was very worried about it, but then his mother wrote to me and she said, I'd like a copy of that particular picture that's on the billboard, because his time in Iraq and Afghanistan was very hard on him, and this picture portrays his trials. So, you know, she didn't want just the birthday picture of her boy. She wanted to remember this time in his life. And then when his picture was on a billboard in Minneapolis, the family drove 400 miles to take their picture under the billboard. So, but other ones I never heard from.
No,
So,
but
I don't know.
could it be that CBS, the company of the billboards, was influenced by military defense?
Oh, I
government?
think they could have been influenced by John McCain and the Republican Convention.
Yeah.
I mean, John McCain was running as a war hero, and these
Yeah.
people don't look like heroes, so.
Yeah. So it's kind
Go
of corrupt.
figure. Yeah, and I think that was what was behind it.
Oh. Okay. Thank you.
And do we have any other questions from the audience? Right at the back.
What was the problem that people had with the billboards? To me, as soon as I saw it, I kind of thought Calvin Klein or something like that, which is by, you know, his aspiration. So I just wonder whether people who are against the billboards had against it.
Oh, they were against it because they felt it looked like a fallen soldier, and we should support our troops, and we shouldn't see people in this position. That it was disrespectful to the military. We should only see pictures of soldiers as heroic, which is generally how we do see them. So they thought it was disrespectful.
Yeah, the question is for Suzanne. Do you think part of the power of those heads has to do with your being a woman? And there's a sort of a kind of interesting tension between a humanity in them and a symbolic violence as you place these heads on what looks like a slab. That's the first question. The second, what was the material of the surface of the table?
Paper.
Paper.
Paper. So what was the question? Is it different because I was a woman? I don't think that a man could have taken those pictures, if that's what you want to ask.
No, I'm just asking whether you were aware, as a woman, whether there was some element of symbolic violence in placing these heads slab-like.
Well, there is an element of it's very provocative, and there's something violent about them. Yes, that's true. But I think that they're also, as I said, very tender. This is both how you see someone when they're fallen, and how you see your lover with their head on the pillow opposite you. So it's that dichotomy between the violent and the intimate. I mean, we only see the intimate people in our lives in that position. So, and I do think that as a woman, you know, that people would put their heads down in that way for me, but they wouldn't do it for me. That's what I suspect.